Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Washington State Wine Canada Instagram Live. Today is going to be an incredible day. We have an amazing guest that we're going to be speaking with, some wonderful wine we're going to be drinking, and a place. We're going to be basically meeting a winemaker from Chateau Ste. Michelle, and I'm very excited. So we have her here today live. She's on her way into our conversation. It's very exciting. Here she is.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm really good. How are you, Angela?
I'm good, Leah. Thank you so much for joining us today at Washington State Wine Canada. You look gorgeous.
Thank you. It's end off in 2 months, so
Yes, I guess you've been in the cellar and working away for harvest over the last, I guess, when did harvest officially start in Washington this year?
our sparkling starts mid to late August, and the white follow that shortly. On the red side, we try and get the first weekend of September off, if that works. This year it did because we didn't have a terribly hot summer. So it started the second, right after our Labor Day. So about the 5th of September, and we brought in our last fruit last week.
Wow. Okay, so you've been going straight for the last, well, for like you just said, what, the last 6, 7, 8 weeks maybe?
Yep.
Amazing. And so you started sparkling, you're into the reds. Is there anything still hanging right now, or are you completely done?
We are completely done bringing in fruit. We saw a very cold snap coming, which was last weekend. And so every winery worked very, very hard to bring in all the grapes before that cold snap hit. So now we're fermenting. We still have plenty of ferments going in the winery, but the gates are shut, which is nice.
Well, for those of you just joining, we're here with Leah Adint. She's the red wine maker at Chateau Ste. Michelle. And for those of you who might not know Chateau Ste. Michelle, you should. I mean, it is such an epic and iconic winery in Washington. And you've been making wine there now for how long?
This is my sixth harvest.
Wow, and you have been all over the world too. I was reading your bio and it's so exciting to see you. I mean, to have harvest experiences all over, you must have so much in that winemaking brain of yours.
I've been really fortunate in the places I've gotten to go, and it to me speaks to how amazing the wine world is. My time in Australia connected me to Burgundy, and Burgundy connected me to England, and it's kind of just those relationships that you never see coming that are what make the wine industry so incredible.
In all of those places that you made wine, I mean, you were probably making all kinds of wine. You were making sparkling wine, white wine, red wine, and now, I mean, you're very specialized in Washington State wine, red wine. Do you have any interesting memories about making wine all over the world that you'd like to share with us?
I have a lot of interesting
Yeah,
stories.
exactly.
Um,
For a good book one day.
yeah, some of my favorites, I mean, I think seeing the varieties that you don't get to see anywhere else. So when I went to England,
Mm.
I was actually in central England. I wasn't on the coast where a lot of the sparkling producers are. And so I saw things like Bacchus and Dornfelder,
Mm.
Felder in these hybrid varieties that I hadn't seen anywhere else. And then when I went to Switzerland, which is really insular in their wine industry, they don't export anything. And they have their own native varieties like Chasselas, Pierre Noir, and Gamay, which were incredible to work with. And I've never seen them
Wow.
since.
Yeah, I mean, and working with indigenous varietals is it's so great for the curiosity of the mind, right? And when you're tasting them too, I mean, they must be so different in the vineyard versus the winemaking. And now you're really diving into sort of classic European varietals in Washington.
Yeah,
And yeah.
I think one of the things that makes Washington so special is that it is such a huge growing region. And I think that surprises a lot of people just how big and expansive the grape growing region is. And so you can go up north and find amazing Rieslings and Albariños and Chardonnays, and then head south and get full bodied cabs and big Merlots and Syrah from every style you want.
It's so incredible. I mean, Washington is, just basically started in the 1980s, and then it went really from like a couple wineries to 1,000 wineries as of last year. So the growth in Washington is just spectacularly fast over I mean, it's been 40 years, I guess. It's not really that fast, but at the same time, it's a youthful region with a lot of young, spirited winemakers. And, but the quality and the premiumness coming out of this region is undeniable with all of the high point wines that are coming out and some of the fantastic red wines that are being discovered all over the world and across Canada, really.
Yeah. It's one of our vineyards, which is Cold Creek Estate Vineyard. It started being planted in 1972. And so when it was planted, it doubled the wine grape production state. Still being planted today. We've ripped out varieties that didn't work and we've planted new ones. And it's a really cool place to see sort of just the evolution of the Washington wine industry from old trellis systems and older varieties, new trellis systems to mechanical systems to, all the different varieties. And we're still trying new things out there.
Well, yeah, because I think Chateau Ste. Michelle, according to my notes here, was founded in 1934 even. So, I mean, I guess wineries were sort of there, but before they really became commercialized or they weren't just sort of family run, there was probably a lot of old vines that were there. And then obviously with modernization in the 70s and the 80s, more sort of relative grapes for the region got planted and are being produced over there now.
Yeah, I know. I don't work with any, but I know Lemberger was one of the traditional varieties planted.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The Chenin Blanc, and there's still a couple Chenin Blanc vineyards out that are really amazing. I wish people planted more of it, maybe one day.
I know those unique grape varietals are probably really fun to make like obviously to grow in the vineyard, but to make for wine in the winery part, it's a little bit adventuresome to kind of deal with new things in the winery, right?
Yeah, we're fortunate. We get a lot of what we call sport varieties, the little bits that really never make it out of our tasting room. They're kind of only wines. But things like Carmenere and Petit Verdot, and at Cold Creek, we actually have 4 of the Portuguese varieties, the Tinta Madeira, Tinta Cao, Touriga Nacional.
Wow.
Those are incredible to explore. I'd never had a chance to work with those before anywhere else, and they're really fun and really different.
So you are on the winemaking side of the business. Was that sort of your own choice, or how did you sort of filter your own specialty into red wine, or how did that journey happen?
I think across my entire journey of wine, there's never been a plan or a goal that this is where I'm going to be or what I'm going to do, which I think has worked out really well, because I think if I had followed some, specific path, I wouldn't have ended up where I ended up. Started with Ste. Michelle. I actually came from Australia, was working over there, and I got the job with Chateau Ste. Michelle as a traveling winemaker. And so that meant I got to work with both the white team and the red team, and I was kind of this helper for both the sides of the winemaking, and got to know the strategies behind it, the styles behind it. And then 3 years ago, I went just to red wines with Chateau. So it was a great learning experience those first 2 years, seeing anything and everything coming my way. And now it's certainly a bit more specialized and focused.
So tell me about the red wines that you produce at Chateau Ste. Michelle, the different varietals that you make.
Yeah, so the big 3, Cab, Merlot, and Syrah. And essentially we've got a couple different tiers that I know that are certainly available in Canada. The one we'll be tasting is our Columbia Valley. And that's really, it's a little bit lighter, a little bit more food-friendly style. We make it with the idea to create it, if you're a first-time drinker, I want you to love this wine. And if you are an experienced drinker, I also want you to love this wine. It's a little bit more old world in style. So not going for power and richness, but a little bit more layered, a little bit more delicate, a little bit less oak. And then we make a sort of more new world style as well, and that's our Indian Wells series. And that's more fruit, riper flavors, mostly warm vineyard sites. And then from there, we do our single vineyard wines, which is Cold Creek Estate that I mentioned, and our other single vineyard is Canoe Ridge Estate, which is where the red wine facility is.
Nice. I know when I teach people about Washington State wine, I always really there's two things I tell them. One, I fell in love with Cabernet in Washington State on my trip there a few years back. I know I appreciated Cabernet Sauvignon, but I wouldn't say it was a wine that I gravitated towards and like loved. And I fell in love with Cabernet when I was in Washington. It was just the elegance to it is the other part I tell people about, this Washington elegance that comes through. You know, that vertebrae of acidity, but that fleshiness of the wine, it's just deliciousness.
I think one of the most common questions I get specifically with Washington Cabernet is, you know, does it compare more to Napa? Does it compare more to Bordeaux? And where does it fit in? And to me, it's neither of those things. It's somewhere perfectly in the middle. It's not as jammy or as intense as some of those Napa cabs, but it's certainly got more fruit and more drive and a little bit more power than a lot of the Bordeaux ones. So obviously not all of them, but generally there's the nice, and the acidity. We're never going to get away from that acidity. So, you know,
it's that four-letter word you always have to remember with wine, right? If it's not wine, it's acid. You got to remember the four-letter word of acid. So you brought up a good point. I mean, my wine is sitting here, and I'm ready to take a little nose and some aroma of it. I know it's 3 o'clock or just after 3 o'clock here in Toronto, and it's noon in Washington right now.
It is.
Amazing. So we're okay to have a glass of wine for lunch in our aperitivo hour. And just as you mentioned, we're going to be tasting these Chateau Ste. Michelle Cabernet Sauvignon. The vintage that I got from the LCBO was the 2017. And this is readily available across Canada and a very popular and well-loved wine.
Yeah, so this, I mean, I love this wine, and it is our most widely distributed red. And we say that with pride. You know, it's really fun to make exclusive high-end wines, the wines that never leave the chateau. But there's so much meaning that goes into making a bottle of wine that can literally go across the world and be shared at everyone's dinner table and things like that. So yeah, 17 was a cooler year for us, which again means great acidity, very age-worthy potential in the 17 wines, both the whites and the reds. And I think when we get to taste this, you know, you'll see that it's not the most powerful wine that we make. It's meant to be elegant. It's meant to be drinkable, quaffable, food friendly.
A nice crushable red, which is perfect as we enter into, it's like 1 degree right now. It's supposed to snow this weekend. I feel like this is the perfect wine that you want to open up tonight with your favorite Netflix series and, you know, pizza delivery or something like that.
They're ready to hibernate already.
Yeah, exactly. And not that we haven't been hibernating in Canada anyways for the last 9 months, I guess, since March, but the nose on this is so amazing.
And I think that's one thing that you know, it's all about layers for our winemaking team. And it's certainly not just myself in red winemaking for Chateau Ste. Michelle. I'm a team of 4, and it's an incredible team to be a part of. But we're always looking for layers. So we're looking for, you know, the fruit's probably going to come first, and making sure that fruit is present and lively and enjoyable. And then, you know, a little bit of toasty oak, a little bit of that graphite pencil lead flavor, and enjoyable tannins. You know, this isn't the wine that needs a steak. Those wines are out there, and I love making those wines as well. But it's nice to have a drinkable wine, like you say.
Yeah, that fruit forwardness, but that elegance and that easiness on the palate right up front is really what creates it. Those softer tannins is really what makes it so elegant too, is that it can be paired with food, but it can also just be something that you open and have as your drink of choice for your aperitivo hour.
Absolutely. Or your lunchtime hour.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with the weather changing, there's lots of different food friendly options for this wine too. I feel like, you know, I always tell people when you're drinking wine, especially like, let's say it's Friday night and you're cooking up something, you're opening a bottle to kind of have as a glass of wine to start the evening off, use that wine as you're cooking, because it will enable that dish to just, you know, really blend itself so much more perfectly with the wine that's in your glass.
Yeah, I completely agree.
When you're not working all the time at the winery, which I know can be a very labor intense and physically intense job doing all of those, you know, batonnage on some of the wines that you're doing, are you spending some time in the kitchen? Are you cooking?
I love to cook.
Yeah.
Really do. And I grew up in Alaska, so I love seafood and anything seafood related. So fortunately, you know, Seattle is not terribly far away, so there's good sources of seafood nearby. And then I've also tried to get into Asian cooking a little bit. I love the spicy foods as well. But yeah, I almost always have a bottle open while I'm in the kitchen.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right. It's part and parcel of it. That's what I was actually going to ask, because your Instagram account it has the Alaskan winemaker, I think is it? And I was like, I have a question about this. So you were born and raised in Alaska.
Yep, I grew up there till 18, and then I actually moved down to Washington and did my enology degree at Washington State.
Nice.
And it was up in Alaska that I kind of got interested in wine, strangely enough, as that is to hear. My dad was in distribution up there, and so I saw him on the sales side, but go on, fancy wine trips and extravagant wine dinners. And I thought that's pretty cool. The travel bug definitely got me. And I am definitely not the salesperson, but I love the science of winemaking. So it was the kind of that combination of being able to do science and craft something, and the ability to travel with it I got hooked.
Oh, it's easy to get hooked in the wine business, I think, too. When I was getting out of university, it was like, how do I travel? That was like the main thing for me, and wine was that conduit to help get you to travel all over the world. So it's so amazing. You've been all over too for winemaking, which is just wonderful, because you've got to spend nice amounts of time in each one of those regions and sort of really feel the culture from each one of those wine regions too, which is really important.
Yeah, I still get to meet with the WSU at the campus here and talk to the students who are going through the.
Nice.
It's not for everyone, I know that, but it's always my recommendation. Go out there and travel and do harvests in different places for as long as you can. Living out of a suitcase, time job. It is hard to go back. When you're young and able and willing to do it, I think it's such incredible experience to see the different grape varieties, the different pieces of equipment that people have, that I think is really lend itself very handy to be just looking in different wineries and seeing this press is similar to this press, but it has this unique feature. Those kind of things that you only see if you get out there and go do the work.
I would. Exactly. I mean, the modernization of winemaking too is a very interesting conversation. I mean, as you sort of spend a lot of time in the vineyard and then also in the winery, I mean, technology has probably helped your job so much in that science part of the job, because the art part is where your creativity is coming into play on the taste profiles. And maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how sort of the intersection of science and art in winemaking comes into play with your philosophy on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I went to Burgundy, I was really fortunate to do a harvest in Burgundy, and it wasn't something that I ever planned. It was the winemaker I was working for at the time said, "Hey, I have this contact, you should go here." And and I went. And it was really cool because it was very traditional, like we built a fire to steam the barrels, and the trap door in the cellar that lowered barrels down into the cave. And so it was really cool to see those pieces of equipment that had literally been used for generations. And at the same time, I've learned a lot working at bigger wineries. Chateau Ste is not the biggest winery I've worked for. And there's pieces of technology that you see at larger facilities that you would certainly never see at a small place. And not that you need to use those pieces of technology every day, or that we do, but it's really cool to at least understand and how an ion exchange machine works, or how reverse osmosis works. And just to have those tools in the toolbox if and when you ever want to use them or think it's going to make a better wine. And I think that's another great part about Washington is, and specifically on the vineyard side, we have never had the labor that, say, like California or even Oregon has. It's always been a struggle to get hand labor for pruning, leafing, for suckering, for picking, everything. And so, Washington has been going the mechanical route for decades now, and consistently improved. I've seen improvements over the last 6 years just in the way we farm the grapes to get high quality stuff, even though it's mechanized. And now, we're getting calls from California who's increasing pressures of manual labor. And they're saying, okay, how do you do this? And what did you change from a conventional approach to a mechanical approach? So it's kind of interesting to see that mechanical, I think, has a don't know if it's a bad reputation, but maybe not as great of reputation as and you know, walking the grapes. And we certainly walk all the grapes, but there's realities that you have to face. And as labor becomes a bigger and bigger issue, it's, you know, we want to be at the forefront of trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a winemaker, you need to have those tools in your toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to understand the art of sort of maybe more natural and historical traditional methodologies like you've learned in Burgundy, and then also be able to, you know, manage those that I guess you could say the running of technology and the integration of it so that there is sort of a flawless you know, integration, because technology is not going anywhere for any of us. And so leveraging it to the best of its ability and optimizing the taste profiles of the wines that come in through optical sorting or whatever that might be. There's some really fun ways to technology is fun. And I think that's where we really need to understand. I was having a conversation with a Burgundy winemaker last week, and they were talking about how it's really hard to get anybody now to pick grapes anymore. Like, it's incredibly challenging. So the future of the machine harvesting of the machine harvester is still is a good one. The future of it.
And the new machines, I mean, they are night and day different from the old ones. We still receive some trucks with an older harvester, and then we receive the truck with the new harvester, and it's unbelievable the difference in quality, you know, before it's even reached the tank.
Mm. And how about your barrel program at the winery? Do you have, tell me more about, yeah, how you deal with barrels at the winery.
So at Kenneridge Estate, which is Chateau Ste. Michelle's red wine facility, we really pride ourselves, even though we are a large winery, we really work as if we are a small winery. So every wine goes to barrel. We don't store wine in tank, which is becoming more common as barrels. Next to fruit, barrels are the most expensive part of winemaking. And so we're really fortunate that we have this incredible barrel program. We have over 80,000 barrels in the winery. And that is really, it's a labor of love. You know, it is probably not the most efficient thing to do, but we really believe in it. And we really believe that that's what keeps our wines at such great quality, and being able to do that on a larger scale. So we're pretty low intervention, which I know is probably not what a lot of people think with a larger wine company.
It's true.
But we really do act just as if we're a 500-ton winery, if we're the small little boutique one next door. So we really are hands off as much as possible. And then, you know, if and when the time comes, we bring out that toolkit for the minor adjustments. But our barrel programs, and I think if we're thinking about the Columbia Valley Cabernet, we use French and American oak. And in this one, it's probably almost a 50-50 split between French oak and American oak. And it's probably about 30 to 35% new barrel. And that's to kind of keep those layers going. I love the sort of spice and a little bit more structure of French oak barrels. And there is something really generous about American oak. Used in the right way and used in moderation, and used at the blending table, it really provides a nice entry point to the wine when it comes across your palate. And then I think, we always adjust depending on the vintage, how much new barrel we're going to put in. We always want it to complement the fruit and complement the wine without overbearing it. And so all those factors come into play, as we're sitting at the blending table, tasting all the wines 9 months after we've made them.
I was going to actually ask you, how often are you tasting your wine in its journey from sort of grape to glass? What's that tasting sort of journey like for you as a winemaker?
So right now, during harvest, everything that's brought in, we taste every ferment twice a day. And that takes hours.
Yeah, I bet.
And then once it goes to barrel, it goes through the malolactic fermentation in barrel. And that's where we kind of leave it alone. It's kind of a weird point in the wine's life to taste. Things are going off and new compounds are being created. And so we just leave it alone until after it's done with malolactic fermentation, and then we sulfur it. So really we do, once harvest is done, we'll go away for Christmas, we'll come back, and we'll do one massive survey of it'll be the 2020 wines. And that'll take us 3 days, and it'll probably be about 400 to 500 wines this year.
Wow.
And we'll start ranking them immediately, not specifically where they might end up in the bottle, but this wine is fantastic. It's perfect for our artist series wine, or this is Indian Wells style. So we'll start to rank them. We do that exact same process again in April or May. The wines have had a little bit of time in the barrel to evolve and become who they want to be. And then immediately after that, we're in blending season all summer. So May, June, July, August, really running into the next part. We're blending. And so then we're tasting everything that we ranked a 1, the best of the best. We always start from the top down. And those are very small case quantities. So, you know, we pick the top ones that match that style. And anything that doesn't make that small case count then becomes a 2. So a 2 quickly becomes a great wine because there's so much that goes into the artist series or our ethos reserve wines. And so that's how we work. We work from a top-down sort of perspective. Lots of tasting, lots of purple teeth at the end of it.
I'm sure everybody's asking if you have if there's like a little winemaker's trip for you know, making your teeth white from purple from that day. It's like those are long days of tasting too.
They might be from 10 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon with a lunchtime. And there's been many times where I've left the winery with purple teeth and not realized it until I get to the realize that people are looking at me strangely.
You're like, it's okay. You should just wear like a shirt that says it's okay, I'm a winemaker. All the time. Everybody knows. So there's actually, I mean, this is very interesting because I feel like not a lot of people might know that, like, obviously people know winemakers make wine, but the art of the science of the taste as you sort of taste along, and this idea that you're tasting sort of the best wines to, the other wines kind of that following suit. I mean, there's a lot of tasting. So you kind of let it rest for a while and then you taste, then you're making decisions, and then you're changing the wine, and then you're tasting again. And there's a team of you making those decisions as sort of as a team.
It is. And we operate as a team. We joke about the democracy of the team when it comes to that. Someone does have to make the final say.
Mm-hmm.
But we are very much in agreement. And I think what I've found anyway, when you work at a winery for long enough, you kind of develop a cellar palate. And so my team and I, we know what we're looking for when we're making that style of wine. And we don't always agree on this or that or every single decision, but we all have the same goal in mind. And so in a lot of what we do, we're tasting, let's say we're tasting in June and we're making that blending decision. That might not get bottled for another 3-4 months. And so you kind of have to think this is still going to sit in barrel. It's still going to evolve. And then it's going to sit in the bottle for another few months before it's released to the market. So you're kind of predicting how much more oak is this going to receive just staying in the barrel. Do we want to put it to a neutral barrel? If it's at the oak level we don't want it to get any more. Is it going to soften out the way we think it's going to? Should we filter it? Should we not filter it? And what's that going to do to the life of the wine in the bottle? We always think that, the nose changes in a wine pretty readily from a half an hour ago when I did this to now. It's probably different, but the palate is what probably stays the same. And so we think about the palate a lot when we're blending. Is it hitting all the right points of the tongue? Is it leaving a nice finish? Are the tannins, present? Are they aggressive? Are they bitter? Are they too soft? Are they soapy? All these things. We think about the palate a lot when we're blending because that's what we really want to last, whether you open that wine the day it hits the shelf or you sell it 5 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Have you found over the years that your palate has shifted or changed or evolved? Or how have you found your palate has sort of evolved as a winemaker?
I think I go through the same swings as any wine drinker. I was part of the, anything but Chardonnay club for a little while. And now I love Chardonnay. I absolutely love it. There's different, I think Chardonnay is a good example because it's so many different styles and some people are very polarized by those styles.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, my tastes have certainly changed. I didn't have a palate for Australian Shiraz when I first moved there. I thought it was, giant and super alcoholic, and I didn't get it at all. And then I grew to love it, and I still love it, and I adore it when I can find it now. And I also really love, I love the leaner style of Syrah too. I love that black pepper, that real intensity to, you know, cooler region Syrah as well. So that's probably the hardest question, you know, what's your favorite wine
Yeah.
it's impossible.
It's always like, what are you drinking now? But it's true, your palate does evolve, and as your mind evolves with wine, as you appreciate, you know, if you spent 3 months in Australia and you didn't like Shiraz before, you're gonna like Shiraz by the time you leave. You're gonna find a way to love it. It's like part of the game, you know. It's one of the glories of wine, I feel like, because you constantly are wrong. And that is the greatest part of being in this business, is being humble enough to say, you know what, I don't know everything. I want to learn some more, so I might as well just taste some more wine.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree.
I think we also get in our market here in Canada the Chateau Ste. Michelle Chardonnay, which is really popular. I actually had a couple people had it at one of my classes this week, and they were just in love with it. So it's another great wine to dive into and pick up and try if you're a Chardonnay fan.
Yeah, and so similar to the Columbia Valley Cabernet, the Columbia Valley Chardonnay is made in a little bit lighter style, certainly compared to the Indian Wells Chardonnay, which is a richer, riper style Chardonnay. The Columbia Valley Chardonnay is about 50% oak and 50% stainless steel. So combining that freshness, some of those citrus pear flavors that you get in stainless steel with the creamier, a little bit more texture of the barrel ferment. And so again, on the white team, it's about finding layers and trying to, you know, a broad market of palate.
Yeah. I love that though, layers. It's kind of like this new, I feel like that is what complexity is. That's what appreciation is. It's understanding those layers of wine, of art, of fashion, of personalities. Like layers is a great theme to bring out. And I know that maybe you could talk a little bit about the sustainability, what Chateau Ste. Michelle does on their sustainability front.
Yeah, I mean, every year we have new committees and different committees working to. It's really great. It's really nice to see, because, you know, we are an agriculture industry at the base, and so we have to take care of our land and take care of our vineyards. And also, you know, sustainability means being able to do it year after year after year, and that means profitability as well. One thing to be sustainable in theory, but if that's not sustainable in the long term, you know, decisions have to be made. So a lot of that is the mechanization. It's understanding that this is the future, at least part of our future, and the right way to do it. And I think, you know, Washington is unique in its climate. Certainly, we're very dry on the grape growing side of the mountains. We're nothing like Seattle, where it gets a ton of rain. We get about, I don't know, 12 centimeters of rain a year over here. So it's very dry. And so we irrigate everything. And so making sure that we're putting on irrigation at the right time, so it's not wasteful. And then, you know, every tractor that runs through every row, you know, you're compacting the soil a little bit, whether it's a spray or it's dust or it's anything. Those are things that we think about every day. And so we're Salmon Safe certified. We're also live certified at both of our vineyards, which just means we track everything that we put in and everything that comes out. We're very cognizant of any sprays that we apply, and do it when we need to do it, not because we want to do it.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing runs in the winery as well. You know, we have a little battle every harvest in our different wineries of water, which isn't always fair because our wineries operate very differently. But it's you know, a nice reminder that every time you turn on that hose, you know, it's going somewhere. It's going down some drain. And then, you know, the pumice, the spent grapes at the end of harvest, we actually work with different cattle feed companies. And so they actually go to feed cows that are in the area.
Cool.
But constantly thinking of ways to either reduce our inputs, concerned about our outputs, and just try and reuse things where we can.
Wow, I know it's I mean, everybody right now I feel like wants to support a brand that is making sure that they're doing everything that they can to, you know, make sure for future generations that this planet is surviving. So thank you for doing all those sustainability things. That's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, it's nice to feel that we are, you know, we're trying, and we've been trying, and we're going to keep trying. And as soon as, you know, I think that's another place that technology is going to only help us.
Yeah, but you are right about Washington State wine. It's so interesting too when people say, "Oh, well, isn't Seattle rainy?" And you're like, "Yes," but you head over the Cascade Mountains into wine country, and it's like a Wild West wine country. There's mountains, there's tumbleweeds. It's a very dry, arid place. It's like really ridiculously different than Seattle, and it's very exciting to tell people that because I feel like their mind kind of gets blown. Oh, wow, not all of Washington is wet, right? As soon as you start to educate people about the geography and the climate, and then these cool Missoula floods that help make the terroir, and the active volcanoes. Like there's a lot of really great things that can get you excited about Washington State wine.
There is, and I think, you know, for anyone who's never been to Washington wine country, I think that's exactly the reason why. Well, you have to come visit if you can, because it is so unique. You know, if I compare it to other places I've lived and worked, where it's a fairly small microclimate, and you might be pulling fruit from other regions. But whether you're located within a valley or you're, you know, coming off of a mountain, that's kind of our feature. Where in Washington, those Missoula floods, they create all sorts of valleys and different steps. And it is really arid conditions. And so, you know, grape growers can use that to manipulate how they want. So if you don't want to irrigate and you want to dry farm, you can get a different result than if you irrigate only in the spring or you irrigate only during the middle part of the summer. And these tiny little tweaks that you see throughout the region that can make really big differences because we are so arid, because it's so kind of controllable in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I'll keep going. I was going to ask you about the vintage variation, how would want to talk about vintage variation.
Yeah. The last 4 years, we've seen pretty big vintage variations. I think my favorite out of the last 4 or 5 years was probably 2016. It was just this real idyllic growing season, a wet spring and a really hot summer and a really nice long fall. One of the things that we see year after year is that, you know, Washington is kind of known for having this fall season. And so we start really early, like I said, with the sparklings and the white wines, but we've been hanging our Cabernet, you know, till last week. So you get a little hang time, which tends to concentrate the berries a little bit. They get a little bit smaller over time. And so you do get this intensity of flavor and intensity of tannin. And something that I had never really experienced before, but we also do a little bit of hang time on our Riesling.
Nice.
Late ripener to begin with. So it's one of the last white varieties that we bring in. But you also get this concentration of acid and this concentration of flavor in the Rieslings. That's really cool and something I never would have thought about or heard about before. But yeah, back to vintage variation. I mean, it's, you know, technology aside, you're never going to beat Mother Nature. You know, she's
going to win. Yeah.
to adapt and to recognize that my 16 might taste a little different from my 17, might taste a little bit different from my 18. And while we want to create, certainly for the wines that we distribute, you know, nationwide or worldwide, we want to create a similar palate for the consumer. You know, I want them to pick this up and say, this is what I remember, this is what I know and love. But also, you have to work with the vintage, and I think working with it rather than trying to work against it is really the only way to go. You know, you can't fight it. You can't try and turn a wine into something it's just never going to be.
Yes, you just have to accent it. It's like a child, you know, you've got to put parameters around it and let it grow up, and then it gets itself in the bottle and it gets all over the world. I mean, your work is enjoyed all over the world. It's such a wonderful career choice. And when travel's back up and ready, yeah. When travel's back up and ready, we'd love to see you in Canada. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Leah Adint, to talk with us, the red winemaker from Chateau Ste. Michelle. You are lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This has been really fun.
Cheers, everyone. I hope everyone gets to enjoy some Chateau Ste. Michelle wine over the holidays into the new year. And keep an eye out for that 2020 vintage. And thank you, Leah. Have a great day.